So today I wanted to expand a little bit on some of the things that I said at the end of the last talk that I did on anxiety. I've just been thinking a little bit about something I said right at the end of that talk, and it was that often in anxiety, perhaps the root is that we end up looking in all the wrong places to get the things that we're looking for, the things like affirmation and acceptance and value. Um, we look in all the wrong places to get those things. And I think that that is actually at the root of a lot of mental health problems, not just anxiety. And so it seemed good to me to address that in a little bit more detail, and in particular to talk a little bit more about the spiritual side of things, and particularly my faith in God, and how that really has an impact on all those kind of things, like our identity and our purpose and our value and our worth and feeling loved and all that kind of thing. And I want to share that with you today because I think it's actually key for everybody, whether they know that it is or not, or believe that it is or not. And actually, the spiritual part of us is so um, little addressed, really, in medicine and in mental health situations. And I think that's partly because of our Western worldview. It's partly because we put a lot of faith in the science and in knowledge. In a lot of cultures around the world, in a lot of countries where the spiritual side of things is much more talked about, and people just know that that's part of normal life. It's usual, it's normal to include the spiritual in considerations of illness and ill health and why people are struggling with what they're struggling with. I just see our dog's tail there as he wanders around. Um, and so I wanted to talk a little bit more about what the background is to my faith, and also how I've seen for myself and also many other people how they've been able to get resolution and get freedom in mental health conditions, particularly as they've grappled with some of these things and started to understand some of these things. So a little bit of background to start with. Um, in the beginning, if we go back in the Bible to Genesis and what's called the fall, where things went wrong at the beginning. So God created man and woman in his image, and he said that what he'd made was very good. So we're created in the image of God, which is an amazing thing in itself, isn't it? And he's very pleased with what he's created. And in the Bible, it talks about the Garden of Eden, and it talks about trees. It talks about a tree of life and a tree of good and evil. And Adam and Eve chose to eat from the tree of good and evil, the tree of knowledge, if you like, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because they didn't totally trust God. They trusted something else more and chose to try and get themselves what he was actually giving them anyway. So he'd given them everything they needed. He'd given them a purpose. He'd given them something that he wanted them to do. He'd given them he'd given them himself. They were made in his image. There's no record of any negative emotions or illness or anything bad. And then they chose to try and reach for something themselves, to try and achieve something themselves. And the first emotion that was mentioned after that episode, if you like, where they ate that fruit and death came in. They were cut off from their father, and so from that moment, fear came in. Adam said, "I was afraid. I hid because I was afraid." So fear, shame, guilt, trying to do things out of their own strength, trying to get acceptance, anger, murder, all those things came in after that, all these negative things that came in. And it's a bit like you could describe it as an orphan mindset. So this connection with their father had been lost, and now they had this orphan mindset. Um, you can Google orphan mindset, and you can read about what it's like for physical orphans, and how they they feel they have to hoard things because they don't know when the next meal is coming. They have certain ways of thinking and behaving that sort of self-protection, and And it was a bit like that for Adam and Eve. It's a bit like that for humanity, that we try and reach for things. We try and fill the gaps that we're born with in our lives, for security, for safety, for value, for purpose, for love, for acceptance, for significance in our lives, so having worth. And we try and look for those things. We know that we have this need for those things, fundamental need for those things. And so we try and fill the gap, if you like. And with that comes a whole load of other stuff that's at the root of so many issues. So things like trying to get acceptance, trying to be liked by people, trying to fit in with the crowd, trying to look like we know what we're doing when we don't, trying not to embarrass ourselves. So many things that come around wanting to be accepted. Things around our identity. Who are we really? Trying to imagine or invent identities, if you like, depending what the media is feeding us or the latest trend is, or to try and fit in with our peer group. Lots of things around identity where we're trying to know who we really are. Then there are things around love, trying to get love. So that might be doing compromising things. It might be that we actually compromise what we really believe and think is right, because we so need that love and affirmation from people around us. Or it may be that we, have relationships. We have relationships with sexual relationships that we wouldn't normally have, because we're trying to get love. We're trying to be loved. We're trying to be wanted. And we seek it in wrong places. It may be that we're looking for happiness and peace from all the turmoil inside and all these negative emotions, and we turn to all sorts of addictive things, addictive behaviours: shopping, gambling, sex, drugs, alcohol, stuff that we're trying to fill up that gap with. Now, not all, some of those things are sort of okay, aren't they? Going shopping's okay. It's when these things are trying to meet a need that actually isn't meant to be met in that way. And it happens particularly, I think, in the Western societies all the time. And I think it's one of those, some of those things have been challenged with COVID and with lockdown. We can't do the things we used to do. We can't connect in the way we used to connect. In some ways, although it's really, really hard for people, I think there's going to be some positive things that come out of that, because we've been made to stop and slow down and start to think a little bit about what our lives are about and what really matters, what's important, what the whole point of everything is. And that's no bad thing. We were on a bit of a crazy hamster wheel prior to all this happening. And it's a good time to stop and just reflect and start to think about what some of these root things are. So if I go back to faith and belief, Jesus came. There's a long story in between. You can read it in the Bible, or a summary of what the whole story of the Bible is about. The whole story of the Bible is basically about a God who loves us and wants us to be part of family with him. And the story of how he works with the nation of Israel, and how he helps a rebellious people and provides for what they need, and ultimately provided himself in Jesus. And Jesus was the second Adam, if you like. He was a life-giving spirit. He came as God and man together, as a new species, really. And he provided the way back for us to be connected to Father again. And he did that by giving his life, by shedding his blood, by being crucified. And that's what Easter, what we celebrate at Easter, that he died and he rose again. He didn't just die, he rose again and overcame death. And so all that was out of love. All that was about the love of a God who wants us to be part of family with him again, and wants us to be connected. And the stuff that was all broken off because of our wrong choices can now be connected again. We can be connected back to Father in Jesus just by receiving a gift, just by saying yes and believing. It's amazing, isn't it? It's not through rules, it's not through what we do, what we achieve, it's just a gift. And we say, yes, please, I want that. And we have that connection again. And then it's a process of learning what that really means. And what that really means is that all this stuff that we try and get ourselves, things like, they're looking for the affirmation, the trying to be liked, trying to be accepted, wanting to be loved. It's a gift. God is there giving us those things. He says that we're loved, that we're his children, that his much loved children, that he'll give us everything that we need for our lives. He promises to provide what we need for our lives if we believe and trust and receive that from him. It might not be exactly what we want or what we think we need, but he knows best and he's good. And as we start to trust him and trust that he will give us what we need, that he says these things about us that are true, then suddenly we don't have to look in other places to get those things, because we start to realize that we actually have them. And that's been my story. A lot of my story has been about me realizing that I don't have to please people. I don't have to be liked. I don't have to run around exhausting myself, trying to score up enough points to be worth something, because actually I'm loved and I'm valued and I'm worth something even if I don't do anything. And isn't that amazing? Because actually that's available for everybody, whether they're capable of doing things or not. Every person is valued the same. Every person is unique. Every person is loved by God the same, irrespective of what they've done. And that is just massive. That's such a massive gift for us. And as we start to think about that and receive that and learn more about that and grow in that, then we can start to look at these other things from a different perspective. So things like the anxiety that comes when things are out of control or uncertain, then because now we're realizing that there's a God who's in control, who loves us and is good, and actually what he says is certain, then we have a different foundation to stand on. So it may be that our circumstances are the same, that our circumstances are uncertain, but we've got a different foundation now, and we've got somebody with us in it. Or it may be in depression, where often there's the helplessness and the hopelessness, and what's the point in carrying on? Suddenly we now see, actually, I'm not helpless, I'm not hopeless, because there's a God here who's bigger than I am, who sees more than I do, and is with me in it. He's there with me in it. I'm part of him. I've got his resources, I've got his love. I can have peace in the middle of it. And so for a lot of these mental health issues, there's a root there that we never really think about or consider. And so I just wanted to just put this session in, really, because I think it would be negligent of me not to. Because I know for myself, and I know for so many other people that I've worked with over the years, that actually these truths, and actually discovering the truth of God for themselves, that radically changes things for people. I've seen many people get free from anxiety and free from fear and free from depression and free from other mental health conditions as well, when they've actually dared to look at some of these root things and actually dare to say yes to God and say, do you know, actually, I want that gift. I want to receive that gift. I want what you've got on offer, God, and what actually I'm designed to be like from the very beginning, but it got lost. So I'd really encourage you just to think about those things. If you want more information, there's loads of stuff online, but if please submit a message if you want to do that, and I'll reply back to you if there's anything that I can help with in more detail on that.